A bus full of students was heading out on a school trip. Everyone acted as if it were the first, and somehow the last, trip of their lives. The excitement reached ridiculous levels when one energetic girl convinced the entire bus to start a pillow fight. Within seconds, pillows were flying everywhere like feathers had declared war. Only one student refused to join the chaos. Reina stayed quietly in her seat, doing what she loved most, writing poems. One girl couldn't resist making fun of her, calling poetry the most boring hobby imaginable before smacking Reina's pen onto the floor. Reina could have told her to mind her own business, but arguing with someone whose greatest achievement was winning a pillow fight didn't seem worth the effort. She simply bent down to pick up her pen. That tiny decision ended up saving her life. The instant Reina ducked, a razor-sharp gust of wind sliced straight through the middle of the bus, cutting it clean in half. In the blink of an eye, every student aboard was killed. Everyone, except Reina. Frozen in horror, Reina stared at the nightmare unfolding around her. Before she could even process it, another violent gust came racing toward her. She barely managed to duck under the first attack and sidestep the second before leaping out of the ruined bus and sprinting away as fast as her legs could carry her. Becoming another casualty wasn't exactly on her to-do list. After running for a while, Reina spotted 4 classmates walking ahead as if nothing had happened. She screamed at them to get down, and yanked one of them out of the wind's path just in time. The other 3 weren't nearly as lucky. The invisible blade tore through them before they even realized they were in danger. Their survival instincts were apparently taking the day off. A little farther ahead, Reina spotted a group of cheerful cyclists. She desperately tried to warn them, but they ignored the panicked girl running toward them. Moments later, every cyclist, and even the surviving schoolgirl beside Reina, was cut down by the mysterious wind. Ignoring obvious danger was proving to be a terrible life strategy. Terrified, Reina fled deep into the forest. She ran non-stop as if someone had stolen her entire life savings. The forest stretched on endlessly, and after wandering for days, she reached a river littered with the bodies of students wearing school uniforms. As disturbing as the sight was, survival came first. She changed out of her filthy clothes using a clean shirt lying near the river, washed herself, and put on a fresh school uniform she found nearby. With no clue where to go, Reina wandered aimlessly in search of another living person. Eventually, she came across a large group of students. They were alive. Even stranger, every one of them was wearing the exact same school uniform as hers. Reina noticed it but was too exhausted and confused to think much about it. She didn't recognize a single face. Then, out of nowhere, a cheerful girl named Yuki ran up and greeted Reina like they had been best friends forever. There was just one problem. Reina had absolutely no idea who this girl was. Things became even stranger when Yuki casually talked about all the years they'd spent together, insisting they had attended the same school every single day. Reina's brain completely refused to cooperate. Had she lost her memories? Was she dreaming? Or had reality itself gone completely insane? Yuki, meanwhile, couldn't understand why her best friend was staring at her like she just introduced herself as an alien. She figured Reina had probably bumped her head, or simply hadn't had enough sleep. As Reina struggled to make sense of everything, Yuki gently patted her head to calm her down. Suddenly, another violent gust of wind blasted straight toward them. Reina instantly ducked, expecting another massacre. Nothing happened. She slowly looked up in complete disbelief. The wind had simply passed through. Meanwhile, Yuki, Soer, and Tijo were so unbelievably oblivious that they didn't even notice the terrified expression frozen on Reina's face. They carried on chatting as if invisible death winds were just another Tuesday. Yuki grabbed Reina's hand and led her toward the school with the others. Not long after, another powerful gust swept through the area, startling everyone. This time, Reina completely panicked. She bolted toward the school building as though death himself had started chasing her. Yuki watched her in utter confusion, wondering why Reina was acting like a serial killer had personally declared war on her. Trying to calm her down, Yuki caught up with Reina and escorted her toward their classroom. Along the way, they ran into their homeroom teachers, who laughed at Reina for looking terrified over nothing. Reina wasn't amused. Once inside the classroom, she finally asked the question that had been tormenting her. Have I really been a student at this school this whole time? Yuki nodded without hesitation. That answer only made Reina even more confused. Maybe everything she'd witnessed that morning had only been a nightmare. Reina finally broke down and told Yuki everything. Through tears, she described how a mysterious gust of wind had sliced an entire bus full of students clean in half. She explained how she had barely survived, escaped through the forest, taken clean clothes from a dead student by the river, and somehow ended up at this strange school. Worst of all, she was convinced the killer wind had followed her here. Yuki listened carefully, and didn't believe a single word. Instead, she walked straight over to the classroom window, and casually slid it open. Reina nearly had a heart attack. She lunged forward, desperately trying to stop her, convinced the invisible wind would burst through the opening at any second. But nothing nothing happened. The wind never came. Yuki smiled and concluded that Reina was simply suffering from amnesia. According to her, Reina had probably forgotten everyone after some kind of accident. It sounded far more reasonable than invisible murder winds, at least to Yuki. As Reina tried to process everything, Yuki introduced her to two classmates, Taejo and Soa. Unlike cheerful Yuki, Soa looked like someone whose morning had already been ruined before breakfast. To lift everyone's mood, Yuki came up with the brilliant idea of skipping class and visiting a nearby lake instead. Unfortunately, their homeroom teacher caught them before they could escape. She demanded to know where they were going. Yuki, Reina, Taejo, and Soa exchanged glances, refused to answer a single question, and immediately ran away. Diplomacy clearly wasn't part of today's lesson plan. Without looking back, they raced through the school grounds, ventured into the quiet forest, and eventually arrived at a peaceful, silent lake. The group sat down beside the water and began chatting. Yuki couldn't resist telling everyone that Reina believed she had watched an entire bus full of students get shredded by the wind, and that she supposedly didn't belong to this school at all. Instead of laughing, Soa paused to think. She might actually be right. Everyone stared at her. Soa explained that there could be an infinite number of universes, each containing a different version of Earth. Reality, she claimed, was constantly branching into new possibilities. To demonstrate, she picked up a rock and tossed it into the lake. In another universe, she said, I never threw that rock. It sounded ridiculous, until reality itself decided to become even stranger. As everyone looked across the lake, a gigantic crocodile suddenly exploded out of the water and clamped its jaws around Soa, dragging her toward the depths. The others froze in horror. Then, in the blink of an eye, everything reset. The crocodile vanished. The lake became perfectly calm again, and Soa was standing exactly where she had been, completely unharmed. It was as if nothing had happened. Before anyone could make sense of it, they noticed a pillow and a sleeping mat lying on the ground nearby, suggesting someone had recently rested there. Naturally, instead of questioning the creepy abandoned campsite, they grabbed the pillow and started another pillow fight. Apparently, these students believed every mystery could be solved with enough feathers. As the pillow burst open, white feathers drifted through the air. Reina caught one of them. The moment it touched her hand, a terrifying memory flashed through her mind. The same thing. The same floating feathers. She had seen them just before the bus was sliced apart. Soa casually took the feather from Reina and tossed it away. She explained that changing even the smallest action could alter someone's future. Then she looked directly at Reina. If you want a different outcome, do something you've never done before. Not long afterward, Yuki grabbed Reina's hand and hurried back toward the school. They returned to their classroom as though nothing had happened. Their homeroom teacher immediately demanded to know where they had disappeared to. Yuki shrugged without the slightest bit of guilt. We just wanted some fresh air. Apparently, skipping class for an adventure in the forest counted as fresh air. At that exact moment, reality shifted once again. Reina looked beside her desk. There it was, the same white pillow. Her breathing became heavy. This time, instead of leaving things to fate, she grabbed the pillow and threw it toward Yuki. The pillow was still floating through the air when the impossible happened. Without warning, their homeroom teacher pulled out a machine gun and opened fire across the classroom. She had completely lost her mind over the students skipping class. 0 to machine gun in under 5 seconds was certainly one way to handle attendance. Bullets ripped through the room as students screamed and dove for cover. Against all odds, Reina survived. At that moment, Soa and Izumi burst into the classroom, grabbed Reina, and dragged her away from the rampaging teacher. The three fled into another classroom, hoping to hide. For one brief moment, it seemed they had escaped. Then another female teacher entered the room. Izumi immediately turned to run. The teacher showed absolutely no mercy. Within seconds, Izumi was dead. Soa knew there was no point hiding anymore. The teacher is coming, she warned. She grabbed Reina's hand and quietly tried to sneak away. But before they could escape, the crazed teacher caught up with them and launched another attack. Soa stepped in to protect Reina. As she held the teacher back, she shouted, "Forget about me. Do whatever it takes to survive. Run!" Reina didn't waste another second. She sprinted through the school corridors along with dozens of terrified students. By now, every teacher in the school had completely lost their minds, chasing students as if detention had suddenly become a death sentence. Everyone rushed toward the school gate, hoping freedom was only a few steps away. It wasn't. The instant they crossed the school boundary, the invisible wind returned. A razor-sharp gust swept across the entrance, slicing through Reina's friends before they even realized what had happened. Once again, Reina survived by pure luck. She had tripped and fallen to the ground just before the deadly wind struck, allowing the invisible blade to pass harmlessly over her. At last, the horrifying truth became clear. Inside the school, the teachers were the monsters. Outside the school, the wind was waiting. Reina picked herself up and ran for her life once again. She kept running until she eventually reached a completely different city bustling with ordinary people who seemed blissfully unaware that reality had completely lost its mind. Desperate for help, Reina rushed into a nearby police station and begged a female officer to believe her. She frantically explained that an an invisible wind was trying to kill her. The officer looked outside. No wind, no destruction. Just another normal day. Convinced Reina was having some sort of breakdown, the officer gently took her inside. Oddly enough, the officer didn't call her Reina. She called her Keiko. The woman introduced herself as Tomoko and claimed to be Keiko's best friend. She couldn't understand why Keiko was wearing a school uniform when she had already graduated years ago. Completely confused, Reina looked into a nearby mirror. Her heart nearly stopped. The reflection staring back at her wasn't her own. She had somehow awakened inside someone else's body. Keiko's body. Before Reina could process the impossible, Tomoko hurried her into a car. Almost immediately, a bizarre crowd surrounded the vehicle, banging on the windows and shouting excitedly as though Keiko were some world-famous celebrity. Tomoko drove them to a bridal dressing house. There, Reina encountered someone she never expected to see again. Yuki. The same Yuki who should have been dead. Yet she stood there smiling as if nothing had happened. Reina opened her mouth to explain everything. "I already know," she whispered. "Stay quiet." Before Reina could ask another question, several women rushed in, excitedly announcing that it was time to prepare the bride. Only then did Reina learn the shocking truth. Today was Keiko's wedding day. The women eagerly tried to dress Reina in a wedding gown, but Yuki stepped in and firmly ordered everyone to leave the room. Once they were alone, Yuki explained that Reina and Keiko now somehow existed together in the same body. As unbelievable as it sounded, Yuki spoke as though it were perfectly normal. Then she casually added, "Whatever happens, don't panic." Easier said than done. When the bridal attendants returned, Yuki completely lost her patience. Instead of politely refusing them, she started knocking them around until nobody dared come anywhere near Reina again. Apparently, customer service wasn't her specialty. Not stopping there, Yuki insisted that Reina learn how to fight. "If you're going to survive," she said, "you'll need more than luck." After a quick lesson, Yuki handed Reina a broken beer bottle. "Use this if anyone gets too close." With no better options, Reina held on to the jagged bottle and followed Yuki to the wedding hall. As Reina walked down the aisle, the guests greeted her with warm smiles and applause. For about 5 seconds, without warning, every smile twisted into a horrifying grin. The guests burst into cruel laughter, making bizarre faces while mocking Reina from every direction. Then things somehow became even worse. They dragged Reina toward her groom. To her absolute horror, the groom was a giant pig. Apparently, this wedding had very low standards. The guests began tearing at Reina's clothes and tried forcing her toward the hideous creature. That was the final straw. Reina snapped. With one swift motion, she drove the broken beer bottle straight into the pig. Chaos erupted. Guests screamed and scattered in every direction, while Reina fought her way through the panicking crowd until she reunited with Yuki. Their escape, however, was cut short. 2 mysterious ninjas blocked the exit. Without hesitation, Yuki and Reina charged into battle. Yuki easily overpowered one of the attackers. After defeating the 2 ninjas, the pair finally escaped the wedding hall. Outside, Yuki suddenly stopped. She looked behind them and frowned. "They're still following us." She turned toward Reina. "Keep running. Don't stop, no matter what." "And you?" Yuki smiled. "I'll deal with our followers." Without waiting for an answer, Yuki turned around to face the approaching enemies while Reina continued running into the unknown once again. Reina kept running until she nearly collided with a young runner. The girl looked at her in confusion. "Izumi, there you are." Reina froze. "Izumi? Not again." She rushed over to a nearby mirror and nearly screamed. She was inside yet another girl's body. At this point, reality had changed identities so many times that Reina was starting to lose brain cells just trying to keep up. Before she could recover, another girl ran over, happily calling her Izumi as if that had always been her name. Reina had officially given up trying to argue. She simply nodded and followed her new companions. Soon they reached the finish line of a massive running competition. Reporters immediately surrounded the athletes, praising Izumi as one of the fastest runners around. Even her teammates proudly claimed that Izumi had been outrunning all of them ever since elementary school and had continued embarrassing them throughout high school. For the first time in what felt like forever, Reina's confidence grew. Maybe she really could survive this madness. The race resumed, and she effortlessly began overtaking runner after runner. Then, in the distance, she spotted familiar faces: Soer, Yuki, and Izumi. Before Reina could celebrate finding her friends again, disaster struck. The horrifying pigman burst onto the track alongside the 2 relentless assassins. Apparently, these 3 had earned a master's degree in never giving up. Without thinking twice, Reina darted off the main track and took a shortcut through the nearby forest. She ran until the running course mysteriously transformed into another section of the race before leading her to an ancient stone house hidden beneath a mountain. Inside, a quiet girl approached Reina without saying much and guided her deeper into the building. What awaited her was deeply unsettling. Hundreds of schoolgirls stood perfectly still in neat rows, as silent as statues, resembling a school assembly where nobody had been allowed to blink. The strange girl finally spoke. Everyone keeps dying because you keep surviving. She claimed that every time Reina escaped death, countless others were doomed to die across different universes. The only way to end the cycle was to kill Reina herself. The girl lunged forward. Before she could touch Reina, Yuki appeared out of nowhere, grabbed the attacker from behind, and quickly dealt with her. At this point, Yuki's timing was becoming almost suspiciously perfect. Reina stood frozen, unable to understand anything anymore. Yuki grabbed her hand and pulled her through the endless crowd of silent students. After putting some distance between themselves and the crowd, Yuki suddenly stopped. "Say your real name," she ordered, over and over. Reina had absolutely no clue why, but questioning Yuki's bizarre instructions had never worked before. She repeatedly shouted her own name. Reina, Reina, Reina. The world around her trembled. In an instant, she was back inside her own body. Relief washed over her. It lasted about 3 seconds. Yuki looked at Reina with a sad smile. "Now, you have to kill me." Reina's heart sank. Tears filled her eyes as she desperately refused. Yuki gently explained the truth. Someone had trapped them inside a fictional world. Reina had been chosen as its main character, and as long as the story continued, countless versions of reality would keep repeating forever. If Reina wanted everyone to escape, the story had to end. Yuki slowly raised her hands. 2 thick cables protruded from her wrists like hidden machine wires. She looked more like a walking science experiment than a human. "Pull them out," Yuki whispered. "It's the only way to open the exit." With trembling hands, Reina did the one thing she never wanted to do. She ripped the cables free. The instant they came loose, a massive stone gate rumbled open within the cave wall. Fighting back tears, Reina slowly walked toward the doorway. She never looked back. The moment she stepped through, she found herself standing inside a busy restaurant kitchen. Chefs hurried around preparing meals. Pots clanged. Orders were shouted. Yet, nobody acknowledged Reina. She walked right past the cooks, and not a single person even glanced in her direction. It was as though she didn't exist. Feeling completely invisible, Reina quietly left the kitchen. Outside, she noticed a long line of strangely dressed men waiting patiently for something. Everything about them felt off. Their clothes, their behavior, even the atmosphere. It didn't resemble the world Reina remembered. As she looked around for answers, her eyes landed on a giant movie poster. She froze. The poster featured her. Reina herself was the main character. Before she could process what that meant, a mysterious man approached her. He called her by her real name and calmly said, "You're in the future." Reina's mind completely shut down. She collapsed onto the floor. When she opened her eyes again, she was back inside the underground stone house. The gate where Yuki had sacrificed herself stood nearby. Reina silently walked through another doorway. This time, she stepped into a frozen, snow-covered landscape. Everything was eerily quiet. As she wandered forward, she came across a chilling sight. Dozens of schoolgirls stood perfectly still inside separate recessed wall alcoves, each isolated from the others as though they were part of some bizarre display. None of them moved. None of them spoke. Reina carefully walked between the silent rows. Then she looked closer. Among the motionless faces, she recognized several of them. Reina knew there had to be a reason behind everything she had endured. The endless deaths, the shifting realities, the countless versions of herself. Determined to uncover the truth, she searched the frozen world until she stumbled upon the most unexpected person imaginable. Sitting alone was a frail old man who looked well over 150 years old. He wore a long, faded red coat that looked like it had been borrowed from a medieval doctor with absolutely no fashion sense. Completely absorbed in a strange game, he didn't even notice Reina at first. As Reina looked closer, her blood ran cold. The character he was controlling was her. Reina watched in disbelief as the old man casually moved her around the game like she was nothing more than a playable character. Only then did he notice her standing behind him. Without showing the slightest surprise, he smiled. "Good morning, Reina." His calm attitude was somehow even creepier than everything she had experienced so far. The old man finally revealed the horrifying truth. Reina and all of her friends had actually died in a terrible accident back in the year 2034. They had never escaped. They had never survived. Using DNA recovered after the accident, he had recreated every one of them inside a massive simulation, turning them into playable characters for his own amusement. To him, their entire existence was just a game. He admitted that Reina had always been his favorite character. Then, with a disturbing smile, he confessed the real reason. He had always loved Reina. Not only had he recreated her, but he had also inserted a younger version of himself into the simulation. As if things weren't unsettling enough, the younger Takumi casually removed his coat, lay down on a nearby bed, and invited Reina to join him. He proudly claimed this had been his dream ever since he had a crush on her during their school days 150 years earlier. Apparently, spending a century and a half waiting hadn't improved his social skills in the slightest. Reina felt sick. Tears filled her eyes as memories of Sora's final advice echoed in her mind. "If you want to change your future, do something you've never done before." For a brief moment, everything became clear. Instead of running, instead of hiding, Reina made the one move nobody, including Takumi, could have predicted. She charged straight at the younger Takumi alchemy and eliminated his avatar from the game. The simulation shook violently, but nothing changed. The world refused to end. Realizing that defeating the younger version wasn't enough, Reina snatched the old man's cane. The moment she touched it, reality twisted around her. In the blink of an eye, she was back where everything had begun. The school bus, the students laughing, the pillow fight, her pen rolling across the floor. It was happening all over again. Reina bent down and picked up her pen. She already knew what came next. If she ducked, she would survive. The wind would slaughter everyone else. The nightmare would simply begin again. This endless cycle would never stop as long as she remained alive. Reina slowly stood up. This time, she made a different choice. Without hesitation, she used the pen on herself. The moment she fell, the world around her shattered into countless fragments. The game was finally over. And that's where this video ends. Like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.